The holiday season is a time of reflection, so we're going to spend a few minutes talking about a memorable era in men's tennis. When Rafael Nadal retired from the game last week, he left a remarkable two-decade legacy in his wake. As Stephanie Sy details, Rafa was beloved on the court and off by players and fans alike.
Throughout his career, Rafael Nadal, known by fans as simply Rafa, claimed 92 single career titles, including 22 Grand Slams and a record 14 French Open titles. The two-time Olympic gold medalist played his last career match in the Davis Cup last week, which was held in his home country. Tributes for the Spaniard have poured in ever since, including from Patrick McEnroe, whom you might recognize from his time as a tennis champ. He's an ESPN commentator and president of the International Tennis Hall of Fame. Patrick McEnroe, it's a pleasure to have you on the NewsHour. You know, I first saw Rafa play in 2010 at the U.S. Open, and I just remember this guy with a modest demeanor that really belied the fire and intensity of his tennis. Over the years, you've seen it all. How would you describe his game? And was there a specific moment when you realized he was going to be one of the greatest?
We were all lucky enough to be blessed to watch him. And I think to me, Stephanie, it was the fact that Rafael Nadal, as you said, was one of the most intense competitors, maybe the most intense competitor that the sport of tennis has ever seen, arguably one of the greatest athletes that we've ever seen. But I think it was his demeanor off the court and the fact that he was so humble when he talked about his game and he talked about the moment. You really felt that what he said was so true. When he talked about he wanted to be in the fight, he wanted to work hard. It wasn't just about the wins and losses. And, you know, a lot of athletes say that, but you don't really believe it. But with Nadal, I really believed it, that he just loved the fight. He loved the competition. Of course, he loved to win. But he always had a saying, Stephanie. He used to say, I have to be willing to suffer when I go out on the court. Now, he suffered physically over the years, but of course, he made a lot of his opponents suffer in another way, particularly on that red clay where he was just basically unbeatable for years and years. And I saw him for the first time in a competitive match in the Davis Cup final when I was a captain for the U.S. We were playing in Seville in a soccer stadium in the final, and they put in this young teenager, and we thought to ourselves, oh, maybe we've got a shot. This is before he'd won the French. Maybe we could beat this guy. And when I saw him beat Andy Roddick in that Davis Cup match in front of the home crowd of 35,000 people, I thought, wow, this guy is different. And he sure turned out to be very different.
He was barely driving age at that time, Patrick. We were all, of course, bracing for the last few years for his retirement. I don't think anyone wanted his run to end. I want to play a little bit of what Nadal said recently about his decision.
At the end of the day, I'll relate to the question on myself. It's about, okay, I can hold for one more year, but why? I mean, to say goodbye in every single tournament, I mean, I don't have that ego to need that.
Ego is something one seldom associated with Nadal. In fact, Roger Federer said the one word he would use to describe his former rival is kind. Patrick, what kept him so grounded, and what impact has that had on the game?
He's a real family person. His uncle was a legendary football player, soccer player for Spain. His uncle, of course, Uncle Tony, became his coach at a young age, and he really guided him. And he made it more about being a sportsman and being disciplined as a player, but also as a person. And that's what made him so popular, not just for what he did on the court, but who he was as a person on and off the court.
Well, he was known as the King of Clay, a surface which you also know very well, Patrick, dominant on that surface at the French Open. He's also, though, a lefty. Is his style of tennis, his grip on the racket, his approach, something we're seeing influence younger generations? Is it impossible to imitate?
I've never, to this day, Stephanie, seen another player been able to do what Rafa did on that slingshot forehand, which created all that topspin, which is what made him so incredibly successful, especially on clay. Now, he had all the other attributes. He had a great two-handed backhand. He became an excellent volleyer. He also became, a great all-court player. Remember, he won 2 Wimbledon titles, including that epic final when he won his first Wimbledon, beating Federer in what many think is the greatest match ever played. But what also sticks in my mind is the last major he won outside of Paris in Australia. I was in the studio in Bristol, Connecticut for ESPN because it was just after COVID. And he was 2 sets to love down and a breakdown. And I remember saying to myself, this is over. Daniil Medvedev is going to win this match. He was totally outplaying Rafa. And Nadal came back and won that in 5 epic sets. He had other 5 epic setters against Djokovic, especially in Australia. But that one late in his career really kind of epitomized the desire, the tenacity, the ferocity that Nadal brought to the court every single time he stepped out there, win or lose.
You talk about Roger Federer, Nadal, Federer, Djokovic. These were known as the big 3. And of course, Djokovic is the only one that has not retired at this point. Had men's tennis ever seen an era like this, Patrick?
Absolutely not. Federer set the bar. Then Nadal was right there with him. And then Djokovic, who for a long time was number 3 behind those big 2, just kept creeping up, and eventually has surpassed all of them now with 24 majors. Now, the one regret that I think Nadal probably has, Stephanie, that he'll never admit to, but that he missed a lot of majors because of injury. And he played with so much intensity, so much physicality that when we first saw him, we thought this guy's not going to play until, maybe his late 20s. Of course, he ended up playing into his late 30s. But I think his dynamic style of play and that ferociousness that he played with eventually caught up to him. But it was still remarkable to see that both Federer and he, and now Djokovic, have been able to play at a high level into their mid to late 30s. And I always knew, Stephanie, that when Rafa knew that he couldn't compete, a little bit goes back to that soundbite you played from him, that he wouldn't be able to be competitive in the big tournaments, that he would walk away. He probably could have won a few matches in a lot of tournaments, but he didn't think that he could actually win it. And that's why he finally said, no mas.
Patrick McEnroe, thank you so much for truly the insider's view on this.
Thank you for having me.